नमस्कार। स्वागत है आपका आपके इस क्लास में। टुडे आई एम गोइंग टू टॉक अबाउट द सोल ऑफ द एज, द applause, the delight, the wonder of our stage. The soul of age. Just a minute. The applause, the delight, the wonder of the soul, the delight, the wonder of our stage. Today, I will discuss this soul of the age. He is also known by other names. I like him. नहीं, I admire him, but I love Shakespeare. Who is this person about whom we are going to talk about today? This person is none other than the soul of the age, William Shakespeare. Born and brought up in the reign of Queen Elizabeth, started his career during the reign of Queen Elizabeth and died in the following age, Jacobean period, Jacobean age in 1616. His career spans from 1588 to 1612. He worked around 24 years. He worked around 24 years for English entertainment, for the entertainment of the world. In his lifetime, he was very successful in his profession as a dramatist, as an actor, and as a poet. Had he not written any drama, he would have been famous for his longer poems like Venus and Adonis, like The Rape of Lucrece, like The Lover's Complaint, and The Phoenix and the Turtle. So you could say that his hand in poetry and in drama, दोनों में he was equally strong, he was equally powerful. From a simple boy of Stratford-on-Avon, Warwickshire, to a great dramatist, to the evolution of a dramatist, ये पूरे शेक्सपियर के लाइफ की कहानी है. As far as his importance in examinations are concerned, he has become a little bit obsolete. Nowadays, questions on Shakespeare and questions from Shakespeare रेयरली पूछे जाते हैं. लगभग पेपर्स में तो अब क्वेश्चंस आना ही बंद कर दिए हैं. बट इस ग्राउंड पर हम शेक्सपियर को लीव आउट नहीं कर सकते. इस ग्राउंड पर हम शेक्सपियर को छोड़ नहीं सकते, बिकॉज He is not a simple dramatist. He is not a simple poet, but he is the soul of the age. He is the soul of the Renaissance. He is the soul of Elizabethan period, or who described William Shakespeare as the soul of age, the applause, the delight, the wonder of our stage. ये the wonder of our stage है, जो delight है, जो applause है अपने आप में. This statement was made by Ben Jonson. Ben Jonson was Shakespeare's contemporary dramatist. Contemporary writer है Ben Jonson शेक्सपियर के, and not only contemporary dramatist and poet, but also a rival poet. As long as Shakespeare was alive, Ben Jonson could not achieve as much success as Shakespeare had. But Shakespeare was not a jealous man. He worked, he acted in the plays written and directed by Ben Jonson. For example, in his play Everyman, in his humor, शेक्सपियर ने एक्टिंग भी की थी. तो शेक्सपियर वाज अ जीनियस, एंड अ जीनियस किसी से भी जो है हेट नहीं करता, किसी से भी जेलस नहीं होता. इंस्टेड ही वर्क्स ऑन हिज ओन. खुद पर वो काम करता है और खुद पर काम करके जो है ही अचीव्स नेम एंड फेम. एंड इन ऑनर ऑफ ड्राइडन, in honor of Shakespeare, Dryden wrote, I admire him. Him is him is Ben Jonson. He admires Ben Jonson, but he loves Shakespeare. तो जो ये लवेबल फिगर है, ये कोई और नहीं, ये शेक्सपियर है. और ये शेक्सपियर की यूनिवर्सलिटी है कि he is described as the applause, the delight, the wonder of our stage. शेक्सपियर के प्लेस की बात करें तो शेक्सपियर स्टार्टेड हिज ड्रामेटिक करियर in 1588 with historical drama. During plague of 1592-93, he wrote poetry extensively, and once the pandemic was over, he came back to the theatrical form, wrote several comedies and tragedies till his departure from England in 1612. वो प्लेज ही लिखते रहे, परफॉर्म करते रहे, कॉमेडीज भी, ट्रेजेडीज भी और सेल्डम हिस्ट्रीज भी. In the beginning of his career, he was a historical dramatist. In the mid of his career, he was a comedian, he was a tragic writer, and in the last phase of his life, he became a romance writer. He came to a reconciliation with life. He realized that he was going, right? He was going from the stage, not from life. He was going from the stage. So at the last, he thinks that forgiveness is the biggest quality. And in his last play, The Tempest, the theme of forgiveness prevails throughout the play. Right? His plays were published for the first time by his two co-actors, Hemminge and Condell. Hemminge and Condell gathered the manuscripts written by Shakespeare for the performances, and after the demise of the great personality in 1616, उन्होंने सब कुछ गैदर किया, and in 1623 they got those manuscripts published in a volume, and that volume is known as the First Folio. The first folio was published in 1623 by the collective efforts of Hemminge and Condell. हेमिंज एंड कॉन्डेल के कंबाइंड एफर्ट से 1623 में फर्स्ट फोलियो was published, and the first folio contained 36 plays out of 37. The one play was missing from the volume, and that one play was Pericles. Pericles being omitted. It was not omitted intentionally, but the manuscript was not found by Heminge and Condell. The title of the first folio was Mr. William Shakespeare's Comedies, Histories and Tragedies. Mr. William Shakespeare's Comedies, Histories and Tragedies, popularly known as the First Folio, published in 1623, collected by John Heminge and Henry Condell. Collected by John Heminge and Henry Condell. John Heminge and Henry Condell were Shakespeare's co-actors. शेक्सपियर की कंपनी में हेमिंज और कॉन्डेल शेक्सपियर के साथ काम करते थे. एंड व्हाट वाज द नेम ऑफ विलियम शेक्सपियर्स कंपनी ड्यूरिंग the reign of Queen Elizabeth? Shakespeare's company was called Queen's Men or Leicester's Men. And when James I came to the throne, कंपनी का नाम चेंज हो जाता है और कंपनी का नाम किंग्स मैन हो जाता है. फ्रॉम 1603 ऑनवर्ड्स लिसेस्टर्स मैन किंग्स मैन हो जाते हैं और वो लिसेस्टर्स मैन में किंग्स मैन में जॉन हेमिंज और हेनरी कॉन्डेल थे. और आफ्टर द डेथ ऑफ शेक्सपियर दे कलेक्टेड द प्लेस written by Shakespeare and got them published under the title Mr. William Shakespeare's Comedies, Histories and Tragedies, popularly called the First Folio. First Folio contained 36 plays. One play was missing, and the missing play was Pericles, the Prince of Tyre. And the First Folio was dedicated to Herbert brothers, William Herbert and Philip Herbert. Dedicated to Philip Herbert and William Herbert. And the plays were preceded by an introductory poem, and the introductory poem was written by Ben Jonson, and in that poem Ben Jonson described Shakespeare, the soul of age, the soul of the age, the applause, the delight and the wonder of our stage. Right? वो इंट्रोडक्टरी पोएम थी जिसको बेन जॉनसन ने लिखा था, और उसी में उन्होंने शेक्सपियर को बोला है कि ही न्यू ओनली लिटिल लैटिन एंड लेस ग्रीक. और आई लव शेक्सपियर, राइट। तो ये बातें बेन जॉनसन ने उसमें लिखी थी जो इंट्रोडक्टरी पोएम थी। तो दीज वर द इंपॉर्टेंट पॉइंट्स अबाउट विलियम शेक्सपियर फर्स्ट पब्लिकेशन, फर्स्ट फोलियो। बिफोर the collection, before the publication of the Shakespeare's comedies, comedies, histories and tragedies, पहले भी एक फोलियो शेक्सपियर का आ चुका था, that is popularly called as false folio। फॉल्स फोलियो पहले भी छप चुका था और इस फॉल्स फोलियो को किसने पब्लिश करवाया था? फॉल्स फोलियो को शेक्सपियर के ही एक कंटेम्पररी प्रिंटर था एंड हिज नेम वाज विलियम जैगर्ड। William Jaggard collected the plays of William Shakespeare and got them published in 1619. False folio, 4 years before the first folio publish हुआ था, विलियम जैगर्ड ने उसको पब्लिश करवाया था। एंड दिस फॉल्स फोलियो contained only 10 plays। इस फॉल्स फोलियो में सिर्फ और सिर्फ 10 प्लेस थे और जब फर्स्ट फोलियो आता है then it contained 36 plays। At this point is very much important from the perspective of your examination. When was the false folio published? It was published 4 years before the publication of first folio, 1619 में। And who was the main hand behind the false folio? It was William Jaggard. And how many plays it contained? It contained 10 plays. And later it was alleged that the 10 plays that William Jaggard had collected and published were not authentic, right? The authentic plays जो है वो फर्स्ट फोलियो के प्लेस है, वो फॉल्स फोलियो के प्लेस नहीं है और इसीलिए उसको फॉल्स फोलियो भी कहा जाता है। क्लियर? फर्स्ट फोलियो 1623 में पब्लिश होता है। बिफोर द अराइवल ऑफ फर्स्ट फोलियो टोटल 19 प्लेज ऑफ शेक्सपियर वर इन प्रिंट। मतलब बिफोर 1623 19 प्लेज of William Shakespeare were in print. The first folio is arguably the only reliable text for about 20 of the plays and a valuable source text for many of those previously published. और फर्स्ट फोलियो में 18 प्लेज ऐसे थे जो फॉर द फर्स्ट टाइम पब्लिश हुए थे, राइट। 18 प्लेस पहली बार पब्लिश हुए 1623 में, कभी भी कोई भी वर्जन उनका नहीं प्रिंट हुआ था, जबकि 19 प्लेस ऐसे थे जो ऑथेंटिक तो नहीं थे, रिलायबल सोर्सेस तो नहीं पब्लिश हुए थे, बट दे हैड सॉ द डे लाइट। उन्होंने डे लाइट देखा था, पब्लिश वो जरूर हो गए थे, बट दे वर नॉट कंसीडर्ड रिलायबल, ऑथेंटिक एंड जेन्युइन। And the first folio of Hemingway and Condell are considered genuine, authentic, original and reliable. And the text that we have today was the edited version, वो सब edited version है इसी फर्स्ट फोलियो का 1623 के वर्जन का। क्लियर? और बेन जॉनसन wrote a preface to the folio with his poem addressed to the reader, right? एक पोयम जो थी टू द रीडर, इंट्रोडक्शनरी पोयम, वो बेन जॉनसन ने इसमें लगाई थी, राइट? आइए शेक्सपियर के अब हम हिस्ट्री प्लेज पर बात करते हैं। Initially, Shakespeare's plays were divided into three categories: comedies, histories, and tragedies. Later scholars divided the plays into several categories. In history plays, basically there are two categories: English history plays and Roman history plays. In comedies, you have tragic comedies, romantic comedies, and dark comedies. Then there are other categories as well, like problem plays, like romance, and there are a few other categories as well. उस पर भी हम बात करेंगे बाद में. Let's talk about Shakespeare's history plays first. During the time of William Shakespeare and Queen Elizabeth, the history plays were immensely popular. Why were they so popular? Because history plays dealt with patriotic themes, or patriotism is the main motto of Elizabethan literature. Shakespeare, being the product of Renaissance, being the product of Elizabethan period, was not an exception. In his history plays, he borrowed courageous characters, brave heroes, और ऐसे heroes who could do anything for the country, for their nation, for their boundary. ऐसे ही कैरेक्टर्स को शेक्सपियर चूज करता है. और बिफोर इवन शेक्सपियर, क्रिस्टोफर मार्लो had also written a few history plays. शेक्सपियर के थिएट्रिकल सीन पर आने से पहले एक बहुत ही फेमस क्रॉनिकल पब्लिश हुआ था, एंड द नेम ऑफ द क्रॉनिकल वाज रैफेल हॉलिंसेट्स क्रॉनिकल्स. पॉपुलरली उसको रैफेल हॉलिंसेट्स क्रॉनिकल कहा जाता है. Right, this is the popular name of Raphael Holinshed's Chronicle, but इसका जो पूरा नाम था वो था Raphael Holinshed's Chronicle of Scotland, England and Ireland. Holinshed's Chronicles of Scotland, England and Ireland. And Shakespeare must have heard about Raphael Holinshed's Chronicle. जरूर शेक्सपियर ने उसको पढ़ा होगा, और सिर्फ पढ़ा ही नहीं होगा, उससे बहुत ज्यादा इंस्पायर्ड भी हुए, और इंस्पायर्ड होकर के ही स्टार्टेड हिज करियर एज अ हिस्ट्री प्ले राइटर. सबसे पहले वो हिस्ट्री प्ले राइटर के रूप में ही अपना करियर शुरू करते हैं। Holinshed's Chronicles is a collaborative work published in several volumes and 2 editions, and the first edition was published in 1577 में फर्स्ट एडिशन, and the second edition was published in 1587, 10 years after the publication of the first edition. Shakespeare came to the dramatic scene in or around 1587, and this was the beginning of his career as a theatrical activist. It was a large, comprehensive description of British history published in 3 volumes: England, Scotland, and Ireland. And on the basis of this book, Shakespeare started to write history plays, and he wrote 10 history plays based on the Chronicles on England, and 1 history play based on the Chronicles of Scotland. 10 history plays that are called English history plays. English history plays जिनको कहा जाता है, बेसिकली दे आर 10 इन नंबर. टोटल उनकी संख्या अगर देखी जाए तो 10 है. And Shakespeare is widely believed to have used the revised edition of the Chronicles as the source of most of the history plays, the plot of Macbeth, and for portion of King Lear and Cymbeline. And this book not only inspired William Shakespeare, but it had also inspired poets, dramatists like Christopher Marlowe. Christopher Marlowe's play Edward II was also based on this Chronicles of England, Scotland, and Ireland. As far as Shakespeare's English history plays are concerned, Shakespeare covers around 350 years. 350 years as time of English history are covered by William Shakespeare in his history plays, starting from around 1200 till 1550. This is the approximate dates. ये है जिसके बीच में शेक्सपियर के हिस्ट्री प्लेस रिवॉल्व करते हैं. अगर फर्स्ट इंग्लिश हिस्ट्री प्लेस की बात की जाए क्रॉनिकली अकॉर्डिंग टू द क्रॉनिकल्स ऑफ द किंग्स, then first history place was King John, first king, from where Shakespeare starts his chronology of English kings, and Henry VIII. यहाँ से लेकर के और यहाँ तक का टाइम शेक्सपियर अपने इंग्लिश हिस्ट्री प्लेस को कवर करते हैं. एंड दिस पीरियड जो है मेडिवल पीरियड जिसको आप कह सकते हो, पीरियड वाज द पीरियड ऑफ 100 years of war. Civil war, also called War of Roses, between two families. House of York and House of Lancaster, and the two families being represented by two different colors of roses, white rose and red rose. शेक्सपियर के प्लेस इन पीरियड्स को कवर करते हैं, और जब बेसिकली वो वॉर के पीरियड को कवर करते हैं तो शेक्सपियर हिस्ट्री प्लेस जो है आर सफ्यूज्ड विद द स्पिरिट ऑफ पैट्रियोटिज्म. द एम ऑफ हिस्टोरिकल प्लेस was to make Englishmen more patriotic and to make Englishmen proud of being Englishmen. The main target of the plays was to let Englishmen know that they are Englishmen, they are religious men, they are supposedly patriot, they are supposedly brave, and they should do anything for the welfare of their country. Right? ये पूरा purpose था उनका. Can there be anything more patriotic or more likely to make Englishmen proud of their country than Shakespeare King, Shakespeare history plays? He treats his historical plays the tumult of confusion, the peace and confusion of this period. Shakespeare wrote 10 history plays based on English kings, and let me write the names of his 10 history plays. Henry VI, Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, means 3 plays on King Henry VI, dealing with the reign of Henry VI. Henry IV, Part 1, Henry IV, Part 2. Richard II, Richard III, King John, Henry V, and Henry VIII. These are the 10 English history plays written by William Shakespeare. The last play, King Henry VIII, being written in collaboration with Fletcher. फ्लेचर के साथ कोलैबोरेशन वहां पर किया था. राइट, हिज लास्ट हिस्टोरिकल प्ले हेनरी VIII was completed by Fletcher. Right, last play completed by Fletcher. FLETCH. Last English history play was completed by Fletcher It means the play remained incomplete by William Shakespeare and it was completed by Henry Fletcher, and this play is Shakespeare's last play. And during the performance of King Henry VIII, the Globe Theatre, of which Shakespeare was a shareholder, caught fire in 1613 and turned into ashes. And in the following year, in 1614, the Globe Theatre was rebuilt. Right? When was it first built? The Globe Theatre was first built in 1598. सबसे पहले तब बना था और 1613 में आग लग जाती है और फॉलोइंग ईयर में उसको फिर से बनाया जाता है. राइट? तो दीज आर द 10 English history plays written by Shakespeare. And this is the chronology of Shakespeare's plays, not the chronology of English kings. अगर आप English kings के chronology की बात करोगे, then the first chronology में king आएगा किंग जॉन और लास्ट में आएगा किंग हेनरी एट्थ. राइट? तो ये शेक्सपियर के प्ले की chronology है, ना कि किंग की chronology है. Shakespeare's historical plays are a link between the process of his development of comedy and tragedy. In between the period of the comedies and tragedies come the historical plays, and these plays serve their own purpose. उनका भी अपना पर्पस है, उनका भी अपना इंपॉर्टेंस है. और शेक्सपियर never wrote anything without significance, never tried anything without some benefit, whether it was monetary benefit or it was the favor of the monarchs. शेक्सपियर कभी भी कुछ फालतू में नहीं करता. He enjoys the royal patronage and he enjoys a great monetary success. दोनों ही उसके जो है फेवर में होते हैं. और ये शेक्सपियर की जो जीनियस है उसके वजह से ऐसा होता है. There were hundreds of playwrights during the time of Queen Elizabeth, and it is said that London was the nest of singing birds during the reign of Elizabeth. But why only Shakespeare? Not because he was given the royal favor, but it was his genius that fetched the royal favor from Queen, fetched the royal favor from aristocratic lords and other prominent figures, prominent patrons of the time. ये शेक्सपियर का खुद वर्क है. अगर हम फीचर्स की बात करें शेक्सपियर के हिस्टोरिकल प्लेस की, तो शेक्सपियर हिस्टोरिकल प्लेस जो है उन सबकी अपनी अपनी पिक्युलैरिटी है, अपनी अपनी स्पेशलिटी है. इन हिज हिस्टोरिकल प्लेस Shakespeare provided nice portraits of English kings and courtiers. One more important thing is that though Shakespeare wrote the plays based on the previous kings like King John, who was the king in the beginning of the 13th century, but the setting of the play जो है it is contemporary England. King John तो 13th सेंचुरी का है, बट जो उसकी सीनिक ब्यूटी है, जो फीचर्स हैं, वो एलिजाबेथ के कोर्ट के होते हैं, ना कि वो पास्ट के. शेक्सपियर नेवर ट्रांसपोर्ट्स हिमसेल्फ ड्यूरिंग द टाइम ऑफ द किंग्स जिनको वो पोर्ट्रे करता है. शेक्सपियर रिमेन्स इन प्रेजेंट, और दिस वाज वन ऑफ द रीजंस ऑफ हिज सक्सेस. राइट? बिहाइंड हिज सक्सेस Shakespeare always remains in present, though he talks about the past kings, though he talks about the previous kings. In this way, he solves two purposes. He is close to the Queen, he is close to the contemporary London, and he is close to other scenery, जो है other aspects of the time, and simultaneously he eulogized English king's patriotism, English king's beauty and English court's beauty. सबको एक साथ जो है कई सारे पर्पज साध लेता है. In the characters of King John, Richard II and Henry VI, Shakespeare presents the weaknesses of English kings. Henry IV, Henry V and Richard III are studies of kingly strength. Means Shakespeare not only portrays the strength of the kings, but he also portrays the weaker kings. उनकी क्या खमियां हैं, उनकी क्या weaknesses हैं. They are right. Shakespeare also portrays them equally, right? And he picks characters from the braver side and the poorer side. John is जो किंग जॉन की जहां तक बात है, तो किंग जॉन इज द रियल क्रिमिनल, वीक इन द क्रिमिनलिटी. हेनरी सिक्स्थ is the royal saint, weak in his saintliness. The feebleness of Richard II cannot be characterized in a word. He is a graceful, sentimental monarch. Richard III, in the other group, is a royal criminal, strong in his crime. Henry IV, the uprising Bolingbroke, is strong by a fine craft in dealing with events, the resolution and policy by equal caution and daring. The strength of Henry V is that of plain heroic magnitude, thoroughly sound and substantial, founded upon the eternal verities. Here we may recognize the one dominant subject of the histories, how a man may fall and how a man may succeed in his life. Right? What are the qualities of a king? What should be the qualities of a king? And what were the weaknesses of the past kings because of which they suffered and they were tortured and they torture others. Right? दोनों चीजें हैं कि किसी की वीकनेस किसी के लिए कमजोरी बनती है और होती ही है वो, और कोई ऐसा भी किंग होता है जो अपने आप में क्रिमिनल किंग होता है. यद्यपि शेक्सपियर के जो प्लेज हैं, इनका जो प्रोटैगनिस्ट है हिस्ट्री प्लेस का ऑन द नेम्स ऑफ द किंग्स है, यहाँ पर एक ऐसा भी प्ले है जिसका प्रोटैगनिस्ट अपने आप में किंग तो है ही है, बट उसके साथ साथ वो विलेन भी है. जैसे रिचर्ड थर्ड जो प्ले है, रिचर्ड थर्ड इज नॉट मियरली अ किंग बट ही इज डिपिक्टेड बाय शेक्सपियर एज अ रॉयल विलेन. इसको सॉरी विलेन की भी कैटेगरी में इसको रखा गया है, इसको रॉयल विलेन कहा जाता है. और दीज प्लेज जो है, जिसको एक क्रिटिक है श्लीगल, श्लीगल ने कहा है कि शेक्सपियर्स हिस्ट्री प्लेज जो है दे आर मिरर्स ऑफ किंग्स. Right? This is Schlegel's affirmation that Shakespeare's history plays are the mirrors of kings. Shakespeare portrayed his kings only as kings and not as human beings. This is also a defect of Shakespeare. Right? Shakespeare portrays his kings only kings, not as human beings. Means human beings जो होते हैं, they are sentimental, they are emotional, they are governed by their heart. But जो king होता है, there is no business of emotion, there is no business of heart in taking decisions. Right? इसलिए he should be far away from human spirits. और शेक्सपियर जो है ऐसे ही किंग को पोर्ट्रे करता है, ऐसे ही किंग की बात करता है. Although Henry V embodies Shakespeare's ideal kingship, it would be a complete mistake to suppose that he embodies the author's ideal of manhood. हेनरी फिफ्थ जो इसका प्ले है शेक्सपियर का, ये शेक्सपियर के आइडियल किंगशिप की बात करता है. राइट? विच प्ले टॉक्स अबाउट शेक्सपियर्स आइडियल किंगशिप तो आइडियल किंगशिप की बात जो है वो हेनरी फिफ्थ में है। आइडियल किंगशिप की बात शेक्सपियर अपने प्ले हेनरी फिफ्थ में करता है। शेक्सपियर्स किंग्स आर नॉट ग्रेट मैन, not even Henry V, but Shakespeare kings are great kings. They are not great human beings. They do not have normal, common human beings spirit, but they are great kings. Or Shakespeare, being an Englishman, wanted to eulogize his previous kings and he succeeds in his attempt. Shakespeare's kings are not, nor are meant to be great men, rather little or quite ordinary humanity thrust upon greatness with those pathetic results. The natural self-pity of the weak heightened in them into irresistible appeal to others as the net result of their royal prerogative. Conclusion में हम शेक्सपियर के हिस्ट्री प्लेस के बारे में ये कह सकते हैं कि जो शेक्सपियर के हिस्ट्री प्लेस है दे शो हिज लव फॉर अथॉरिटी एंड डिसिप्लिन, राइट? दे शो शेक्सपियर्स लव फॉर अथॉरिटी एंड शेक्सपियर्स लव फॉर डिसिप्लिन। Right? Shakespeare's love for authority and discipline. Shakespeare considers law and authority necessary for civilized life, and we see the importance of law, the importance of discipline in Shakespeare's tragedies and comedies as well. And these are the two qualities that Shakespeare wanted to inculcate in the present society. The importance of law. Law should always prevail, and law should be equal for the common man and for the aristocrats. Authority, there must be an authority because it is only authority that can force anyone to be disciplined, right? Discipline सबसे ज्यादा जरूरी है और discipline जो है वो forcefully आती है. It is not natural, but it is compelled by the royal kings, by the authority. कंपेल की जाती है ये, तभी लोग फॉलो करते हैं. He extols government with a favor that suggests a real and ever-present fear of the breaking of floodgates. He delights in government as painters and musicians delight in composition and balance. The change of social and political institutions did not interest him. Shakespeare desired to combine all the plays into a whole. In completing the moral and political philosophy of good or bad, government comes in as necessary part of the conception, but its lessons were not directly but indirectly given. His true aim was to represent human life in action and thought within the limits which history set before him. Actually, during the reign of Queen Elizabeth, before the reign of Queen Elizabeth, England was very tumultuous, very violent country because of some religious purposes, because of some political purposes. After the death of Edward VI, there was no apparent male heir to the throne. So there was long discussion about the patriotism. There was long discipline about authority. There was a long discussion about discipline. And Queen Elizabeth was the epitome of all these things. Right? That's why Shakespeare picked all the characteristics of English kings and he saw all those characteristics in one monarch, and that monarch was his own patron, and that was Queen Elizabeth. Queen Elizabeth remained unmarried only for the sake of her country, only for the sake of England, for the sake of English people. So such was her discipline, and this is the reason Shakespeare always emphasized the quality of discipline in his English history plays especially. Clear? So this was a lecture on Shakespeare's English history plays, and in the next class I will talk about Shakespeare's Roman history plays. Though they are not more in number, they are just three: Julius Caesar, and after Julius Caesar its sequel Antony and Cleopatra, and then Coriolanus. Right, that too doesn't need as a lengthy discussion, a lengthy debate, but certainly I will cover those plays, and then I'll come to his great tragedies, right, namely Hamlet, King Lear, Othello, and Macbeth. Thank you for today's class, and thank you for being with me. Good luck. All the best.